My name is Leo. I'm 34, and for the last few years, I've been living a life I built with my own two hands, board by board, breath by breath. It wasn't a monument to success meant to cast a shadow back on my family. It was a sanctuary. I just wanted to breathe my own air, untainted by the low-grade, constant pressure of their judgment. I found a small apartment in Port Blossom, a city that smelled of salt and rain, an hour's drive and a world away from the manicured lawns and quiet resentments of my hometown, Willow Creek. I started a small landscape design studio, Terra Firma Designs, helping people find harmony in their own small patches of earth. It felt right, creating pockets of peace for others when I was so desperately seeking my own. The departure wasn't a grand, cinematic exit. There were no raised voices or slammed doors, just a quiet packing of boxes and a slow, deliberate drive down the coast. I thought a gradual fade would be kinder, less confrontational. I was naive. In the years that followed, my presence in the family narrative was slowly erased, like a photograph left in the sun. Invitations to christenings and birthdays became after-the-fact discoveries on social media. My mother's calls grew sparse, her texts brief and functional. Solstice gathering at Clara's if you're not busy. It was a summons, not an invitation, stripped of any warmth. Yet, I still tried. I would drive back to Willow Creek, my car filled with the scent of a carefully chosen bottle of wine or a bouquet of peonies from the Port Blossom market. I would walk into a room and feel the subtle shift in atmospheric pressure, the conversations that would dip to a whisper as I passed. My Uncle Marcus would clap me on the shoulder a little too hard, a smirk playing on his lips as he'd boom, "Look what the tide washed in." They saw my independence not as a sign of strength, but as an indictment of their way of life, a quiet accusation that I thought I was better. I never said that. I never thought that. I just wanted to be seen for who I was, not who they expected me to be. There was one tether I never cut, the Sterling Family Legacy Fund. My grandfather, Thomas, had established it decades ago. He built a modest empire in regional logistics and had the foresight to put a significant portion of it aside. His vision was simple and noble, a communal well from which family members could draw in times of genuine need, a medical crisis, a lost job, a chance to go back to school. Each of us was expected to contribute a small percentage of our income annually, a gesture of shared responsibility. I took it seriously. It was a connection to him, to the best parts of our family's history. Every year, I made my electronic transfer. There was never an acknowledgement, never a thank you, but I did it anyway. It felt like honoring a promise I had made to him in my heart. That brings me to this past June. The summer solstice. My cousin Alara, a bright spark in the often dim constellation of my relatives, sent me a message a week prior. "Please tell me you're coming to the solstice party. I've already told Aunt Clara you're taking the seat next to me. No excuses." My finger hovered over the keyboard. I could already picture it. The suffocating niceness, the cloying scent of my Aunt Clara's prize-winning roses mingling with roast chicken, the way my mother's smile would grow tight and thin the moment I walked in, a silent warning to behave. But Alara was my anchor to the family I wished we were. She saw my work, celebrated my small successes, and never once made me feel like an outsider. For her, I would brave the emotional crosscurrents. So I went. I wore a crisp linen shirt, brought a chilled bottle of Sancerre for the table, and a pot of lavender for Aunt Clara, a nod to her garden. Her house was a shrine to suburban perfection. Sunlight streamed through spotless picture windows, glinting off crystal glasses and silver platters of meticulously arranged canapes. I stepped over the threshold and felt the familiar sensation of shrinking, of becoming the awkward, quiet boy I had worked so hard to leave behind. People were scattered across the open-plan living room and out onto the patio, their laughter echoing a little too loudly. And then I saw her. My Aunt Clara, a vision in a pastel silk tunic, presiding over the dining table as if it were her throne. She was holding a platter of salmon blinis, her expression one of serene command. Her gaze swept the room, landed on me, and a flicker of something annoyance, perhaps, crossed her face before being smoothed over with a saccharine smile. She glided towards me. Her eyes performed a swift, critical appraisal of my attire before meeting mine. Then, in a voice just loud enough for the nearby cluster of cousins to overhear, a voice like honey laced with arsenic, she said, "This table is for the family, Leo." The world seemed to slow down. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, it all faded into a dull hum. I was sure I had misheard. It had to be a joke, one of her poorly executed attempts at wit. But her eyes were cold, devoid of any humor. I glanced towards Alara, whose face was a mask of disbelief and horror. Then my eyes found my mother, seated at the head of the table, serenely sipping a glass of white wine. She met my gaze for a fraction of a second before looking away. "You wanted your own life, dear," my mother added, her voice carrying across the room with devastating precision. She didn't even turn her head. "This is part of it." I stood there, frozen, the neck of the wine bottle growing damp in my hand, the lavender in the other suddenly feeling like a foolish prop. A strange, hollow laugh escaped my lips. It wasn't a sound of amusement, but of pure, unadulterated shock. It was the sound of a final illusion shattering. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. I had spent years trying to argue my case in a court that had already passed sentence. Without a backward glance, I turned and walked out the way I had come, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me with an air of finality. I sat in my car, the engine off, the quiet cabin a stark contrast to the cacophony of my thoughts. There was no anger, not yet. Just a profound, aching numbness. I thought of 1,000 clever, cutting remarks I could have made, 1,000 ways I could have defended myself. But I had played that game before. It was a game I could never win. My phone buzzed, startling me. A text from Alara. "I'm so sorry, Leo. That was monstrous. We're leaving." Another buzz. Her husband, Ben. Right behind her. "Meet us at the Gilded Sparrow in 10? First round's on me." I looked up through the windshield just in time to see Alara rise from the table. She said something brief and quiet to her mother, her back ramrod straight, and then walked purposefully toward the door, Ben in her wake. A moment later, my cousin Finn, a gentle soul who'd recently started a small woodworking business and had called me for advice just months before, stood up as well. He gave a quiet, awkward nod to his parents and followed them out. Then 2 more of the younger cousins, twins who had always been on the periphery, slipped out with barely a ripple. I hadn't planned it. I had no grand strategy for rebellion. But in that moment, seeing the small exodus of kindness, seeing with absolute clarity who stood with me and who sat silently by, I knew that my own silence was over. As I sat there, the full weight of my annual contributions to the Sterling Legacy Fund came crashing down on me. Year after year, I had dutifully poured my resources into a well from which I was not allowed to drink, funding the very people who wouldn't even save me a seat at their table. I scrolled through my contacts, found the email address for the fund's management firm, and began to type. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pristine lawns of Willow Creek. A new day was dawning for me, but for the rest of them, the night was just beginning. By the time I was back in the calm sanctuary of my apartment in Port Blossom, the scent of the sea a welcome balm, 3 voicemails had already populated my phone. The first was from Alara, her voice warm and steady. "Just checking on you. Don't you dare feel for a second that you're alone in this. Call me tomorrow." The second was from Finn, hesitant and soft. "Hey Leo. Man. I don't know what to say. That was not okay. If you need to talk, I'm around." The third was from my mother. Her voice was stripped of all emotion, each word a carefully honed weapon. "I don't know what you think you accomplished by making such a scene, Leo. You embarrassed this family. This little standoff of yours has gone on long enough. It's time to grow up." I didn't call her back. Instead, I opened my laptop. The screen cast a cool, blue light across my face as I logged into the administrative portal for the Sterling Family Legacy Fund. It was a little-known fact, a detail long forgotten by everyone else, that I was more than just a contributor. In his will, Grandfather Thomas had included a peculiar clause, the first of his grandchildren to achieve complete financial independence, without ever taking a distribution from the fund, would be granted co-administrator privileges. At the time, The family had dismissed it as one of his eccentricities. But I had built terra firma designs from nothing, paid off my student loans, and met the criteria before anyone else. My mother had called it a cute little honorific when the letter from the estate lawyers arrived. I never told her about the morning my grandfather sat across from me in a sun-drenched diner, his coffee black, his gaze direct. "That fund can be the glue that holds this family together, Leo," he'd said, his voice raspy. "But only if the right person is watching the well." I always thought he meant protecting the money. I was beginning to understand he meant protecting it from the people. I began to dig through the transaction logs, a digital archaeology of entitlement. The records stretched back years, a litany of questionable withdrawals. My uncle Marcus had taken out over $50,000 in the last 18 months for investment property renovations, despite his comfortable six-figure salary. My younger sister, Chloe, had been granted $12,000 for educational advancement, which, after a bit of cross-referencing on her social media, turned out to be a 6-week artisan bread-making course in Tuscany. And Aunt Clara, the host of the party, the arbiter of who was and was not family. She had received a substantial reimbursement for a medical hardship. The attached invoice, however, was from a high-end wellness retreat in Sedona. The anger I'd expected to feel never came. It was replaced by something colder, more resolute. It was the chilling calm of watching a hairline crack in a dam slowly spiderweb over years, knowing the breach was not a matter of if, but when. The next morning, I composed a formal letter to the financial firm that provided oversight. I wasn't dissolving the fund or removing anyone. Not yet. I was simply exercising my right as co-administrator to place a temporary freeze on all distributions pending a full, independent audit. I cited concerns over a pattern of irregularities and a potential deviation from the fund's charter. It was a move cloaked in the dry, unassailable language of bureaucracy, a move that would feel like a slammed and bolted door to those accustomed to an open vault. The email was sent at 9:42 a.m. At 10:17 a.m., my phone began to buzz incessantly. "Mom." Decline. "Uncle Marcus." Decline. A group text from a number I didn't recognize exploded to life. "Did Leo lock the account? I can't get my draw. What the hell is going on?" I ignored it. I sent a separate, private message to the financial firm. "Please direct all inquiries regarding the account freeze to me personally. A formal plan for the audit and future governance will be provided within the week." By lunchtime, a new email arrived, sent to the entire extended family mailing list. The subject line, from Aunt Clara, read, "An unconscionable and vindictive overstep." In it, she painted me as unstable, bitter, and emotionally compromised. She accused me of holding the family hostage over a perceived slight. She even included a poorly veiled threat about consulting with their attorney. But it was the last line that caught my breath, the line that crystallized everything. "It's a shame," she wrote, "because this only proves what some of us have known for years. Leo has never truly been one of us." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Never truly been one of us. She meant it as the ultimate condemnation, but it felt like a key turning in a lock. That was it, wasn't it? The quiet truth that had hummed beneath every strained holiday, every forced smile. I wasn't like them. I didn't value appearances over authenticity. I didn't believe in entitlement. I questioned things. And for that, I was an apostate. But there was something else they didn't know. Something my grandfather had done that went far beyond the trust fund. We used to have breakfast every month, just the two of us. One rainy Tuesday morning, he looked at me over the rim of his coffee cup and said something I'd thought at the time was a sentimental metaphor. "You know that place up at the lake, Cedarwood Point? The place where all the best memories live? They all think it belongs to the family. It doesn't." He'd paused, a small, secret smile on his face. "I put it in your name years ago, Leo. The paperwork is with my lawyer. The taxes are paid through a holding company. I wanted to make sure it went to someone who knew how to build things, not just use them up." I had thought he was rambling. But after he passed, his lawyer had sent me a thick manila envelope containing the deed, transfer records, and a notarized letter from my grandfather himself, explaining his reasoning. The house where we'd spent every summer of my childhood, the sprawling cedar-shingled cottage on the water. The place they had, in recent years, begun treating like their personal country club, hosting anniversary parties, graduation blowouts, even a cousin's wedding reception last fall. They never asked permission. They never thought they had to. I opened a new draft in my email. This one wasn't for the whole family. It was addressed to a single recipient, my mother. I kept it brief. Subject: Cedarwood Point. Mom, given that I have been formally declared as someone who is not truly part of this family, I assume there will be no objections to me exercising my legal rights as the sole owner of the property at 417 Cedarwood Point Lane. Please find a formal notice of restricted access attached. Effective immediately, all family events scheduled to take place at the property are canceled. The locks will be changed this Friday. Leo. I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair and listened to the profound, unbroken silence of my apartment. It was the sound of peace. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't defending. I was defining the terms. The phone on my desk began to vibrate, a frantic, insistent buzzing against the wood. I let it go to voicemail. The real storm had only just begun. It took less than an hour for the digital town square of our family group chat to descend into absolute pandemonium. Ilara, my loyal correspondent from behind enemy lines, sent me a stream of screenshots. My mother's all-caps fury. How dare you? After everything this family has given you, followed by Uncle Marcus's blustering threats about hiring a litigator to fight my theft of a family heirloom. Aunt Clara weighed in with what she must have thought was the final, sanctimonious blow. Your grandfather would be so deeply ashamed of you. That last one gave me pause, not because it stung, but because it was so profoundly, breathtakingly wrong. They had no idea who Grandfather Thomas truly was. They had curated a convenient memory of him, a benevolent, old-fashioned patriarch who would surely endorse their version of the world. They had forgotten the tough, clear-eyed man who once told me, Leo, be kind, but don't be a damn fool. There's a difference between a safety net and a hammock. I stayed silent. The next morning, a new voicemail appeared. It was Finn. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Hey. Wow. Things are nuclear over here. But listen, for what it's worth. I think they're only screaming this loud because you're the first person who ever dared to hold up a mirror. Let me know if you need anything. Seriously. That message was a lifeline. It came from the heart of their world, a quiet testament that I wasn't just a vengeful outcast. The first knock on my actual door came that afternoon. I wasn't surprised to see my mother on the other side, her face pale, her knuckles white as she clutched the strap of her expensive handbag. She didn't wait for an invitation, brushing past me into my sun-filled living room as if she still held some maternal authority there. Leo, she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and panic. We need to put a stop to this. I closed the door gently and leaned against it, crossing my arms. My home, my space. The rules were different here. A stop to what, Mom? This spectacle, she said, waving a hand vaguely. Freezing the fund, seizing the lake house. Do you have any idea how this looks? Is that your primary concern? I asked, my voice calm level. How it looks? You're behaving like a vindictive, spoiled child. A single, dry laugh escaped me. I'm the child? I was publicly humiliated and disowned at a family party you were hosting. You sat there and said nothing. When I walked away from that, you called me the one making a scene. Now you're standing in my house, demanding that I continue to enable and finance the very people who treat me like an inconvenient stranger. And you think I'm the one who needs to grow up? She had no answer. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The arguments she had prepared were useless against the simple, unadorned truth. You told me I made my choice when I moved away, I continued, my voice softening but losing none of its edge. You were right. I chose self-respect. Now it's your turn to live with the consequences of your choices. You don't get to throw me to the wolves and then ask me to pay for their dinner. Her composure finally cracked. I could see the glint of tears in her eyes, but I didn't rush to comfort her. I had done that my whole life. Not this time. This isn't you, Leo, she whispered, her voice raw. You're not this cruel. No, I agreed quietly. I'm not. I'm just done being your collateral. She left without another word, the sound of the door closing behind her more of a sigh than a slam. Later that night, Alara called. Her voice was a mixture of stress and wry amusement. They're in a complete tailspin, she said. Marcus tried to call the events coordinator he'd hired for his daughter's graduation party at Cedarwood Point. Found out the hard way that the venue was, shall we say, under new management. I allowed myself a small smile. Did he now? Oh, it gets better. Aunt Clara called the property management company and apparently tried to pull rank, telling them she was the matriarch of the family and demanding they ignore any instructions from you. The manager told her he only takes instructions from the legal owner of record and then hung up on her. We shared a moment of quiet, knowing laughter. It wasn't about their suffering, but about the absurdity of their entitlement finally colliding with reality. There's something else, Alara said, her tone growing serious. They're calling an emergency family meeting. At Grandma's house. The agenda is you. They're going to try to unify the family, paint you as the enemy, and pressure you to reverse everything. Marcus is talking about trying to vote you out as a trustee. I felt a familiar, slow-burning fire rise in my chest, but this time it wasn't anger. It was resolve. Let them, I said. Let them have their meeting. Let them show their hand. I had been waiting for this. Ever since that solstice afternoon, I had been working with the lawyer who managed my grandfather's estate. He was an old-school gentleman who remembered Thomas Sterling not as a piggy bank, but as a shrewd and principled man. Together, we had drafted a series of amendments to the trust's bylaws. My grandfather hadn't just given me administrative privileges, he had given me, under specific circumstances of mismanagement, the power to propose revisions to protect the fund's longevity and integrity. It wasn't a blank check, but it was a powerful tool. And I was waiting for them to prove, unequivocally, why it needed to be used. 2 days later, the formal email arrived. Subject: Urgent Family Council. No greeting, no niceties. Just a time and a place, and the unspoken, arrogant assumption that I would appear before their tribunal to be judged. I stared at the summons. Then I clicked forward, typed in my lawyer's email address, and added a single sentence. They've taken the bait. It's time. I did not attend their meeting. Instead, at exactly 7 p.m. on Sunday evening, just as they would be settling into my grandmother's formal living room, I sent one last email to the entire family mailing list. Attached was a legally binding document from my lawyer's firm. The subject line was stark and official: Notice of Reorganization of the Sterling Family Legacy Fund. The body of the email was brief and dispassionate. Dear family, in light of recent events, including documented misuse of funds and a pattern of exclusionary behavior that runs contrary to the stated purpose of the Sterling Family Legacy Fund, a formal restructuring has been enacted to preserve the fund's original intent and ensure its long-term viability. Effective immediately, the following changes are in place. 1. The fund will be converted to a contribution-based model. Only family members who are active, documented contributors will be considered beneficiaries eligible for distributions. 2. All withdrawal requests must now be submitted to a newly formed independent review board, accompanied by verifiable documentation of need. 3. A new bylaw has been added. Any beneficiary found to have engaged in harassment, malicious exclusion of other family members, or fraudulent use of funds will be subject to permanent removal from the trust. 4. To ensure impartial governance, day-to-day administration will be managed by a third-party fiduciary. This is not an act of retribution. It is an act of restoration. The fund was created by my grandfather to be a source of support in times of genuine hardship, not a subsidy for a lifestyle of entitlement. My goal is to return it to that honorable purpose. Respectfully, Leo Sterling. Then, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I powered down my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and went to sit on my small balcony. I listened to the distant sound of a foghorn from the harbor and the rustle of leaves in the coastal breeze. The fallout would come, I knew, but for the first time, I wouldn't be in the middle of the storm. I would be watching it from a safe harbor I had built myself. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, it was a digital war zone. 47 missed calls. 18 voicemails. Over 100 unread text messages. Most were from the predictable sources, my mother, Uncle Marcus, and Clara, their messages a chaotic symphony of rage, disbelief, and panic. Marcus accused me of being a tyrant. Clara's voice was a high, panicked shriek on a voicemail, repeating, "You can't do this to us. You have no right." But they were wrong. I did have the right. Legally, ethically, and for the first time in my life, I felt I had the moral high ground as well. Amid the deluge of anger, there were other messages. A simple text from Alara, "You just dropped a truth bomb on a house of cards. I am so damn proud of you." A quiet email from Finn, "It's going to be messy, Leo, but it's the right thing to do. Thank you for having the courage no one else did." Even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, a single mom working as a nurse, sent a short note. I always felt sick about how some people were using that money. Maybe now it can actually help people who need it. Thank you. In the weeks that followed, a strange quiet descended. It wasn't the silence of peace, but the silence of a machine that had run out of fuel. Without the endless flow of unearned money and my complicit silence to power their dysfunction, they were forced to confront the wreckage they had created. The emergency family meeting I later learned from Alara had imploded. Voices were raised, accusations were hurled, and the unified front they had hoped to present against me crumbled into bitter infighting. My mother and I didn't speak for 2 months. I didn't push. I didn't send conciliatory texts or make desperate olive branch phone calls. I let the silence be. I let it hold up a mirror to her. When she finally called, her voice was different. Subdued. She tried to start with pleasantries, to skate over the chasm that had opened between us. I didn't let her. "Why, Mom?" I asked, my voice gentle but firm. "Why did you let them treat me that way?" At the party, at Christmas, all those years. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, so long I thought she had hung up. Then, her voice was barely a whisper. Because if I stood up for you, Leo, they would have put me on the outside with you." The admission landed with the force of a physical blow, not because it was a surprise, but because hearing the truth spoken aloud gave it a terrible, undeniable weight. I was the price of her admission to the club. "I guess you lost me anyway," I said softly. The silence returned, thick with everything left unsaid. "I don't want to lose you," she finally whispered. I took a deep breath, the sea air filling my lungs. "Then start treating me like someone worth keeping." Our relationship didn't magically heal. There was no tearful reunion. But it was a start. A crack of light in a door that had been sealed shut for years. The Sterling Legacy Fund did not collapse. In fact, it began to flourish. With transparent rules and impartial oversight, the frivolous drains on its resources stopped. We established a scholarship program and an emergency medical grant. We even created a seed fund for family entrepreneurs with solid business plans. The first recipient was Finn. The fund matched his initial investment to help him buy new equipment for his woodworking business, Verdant Futures. He sent me a photo of the first custom dining table he completed, the grain of the wood glowing under the finish. The text with it read, "This is real. Thank you for believing in me." Alara, with her sharp mind and compassionate heart, became the second co-administrator on the new review board. We were a team. As for the others, Uncle Marcus threatened a lawsuit, but my grandfather's legal work was, as his lawyer put it, ironclad. He ended up wasting a small fortune on legal fees only to be told he had no case. Aunt Clara retreated to social media, posting vague, passive-aggressive memes about betrayal and the true meaning of family. My sister, Chloe, simply vanished from the conversation, a ghost in the family machine. My mother is trying. Slowly, hesitantly. She came to Port Blossom for my birthday this year. She brought a small, simply wrapped gift and no backhanded compliments. Inside the box was a framed photo of me and grandfather Thomas on the dock at Cedarwood Point when I was 10. The card simply said, "Thank you for making things better." Even when I didn't understand. I kept it on my desk. Cedarwood Point is no longer a free-for-all. It's a sanctuary again. People ask to use it now, and they respect the space. Last summer, Alara and I hosted a 4th of July barbecue. Invitation only. Some relatives didn't come, their pride too wounded. But many did, including Finn and his wife and the nurse cousin with her kids. We grilled, we swam, and as dusk settled over the lake, we sat on the deck under strings of fairy lights, the laughter genuine, the air light. I still walk down to the end of that dock sometimes, especially in the early morning when the mist is rising off the water. I sit where my grandfather and I used to sit, my feet dangling just above the surface. I think about the choices I made, the silence I shattered, and the family I nearly lost. And I feel no regret. I finally understand what my grandfather meant about watching the well. It wasn't about guarding the money. It was about guarding its soul. Sometimes, to save a garden, you have to pull the weeds, till the soil, and have the courage to plant something new in its place. You have to be willing to burn down what's rotten to let in the light.